Philly said, that's bullshit. Fuck you. That's what he said as we're recording. I'll chop all this stuff off.
Sure.
I'm just going to send him a text message and let him know that I love him. Say, sorry, amigo. Richie. He's not that upset.
He's just jacking your jaws.
Jack in the jaws.
Jacking the jaws.
All right. Here we go. Hold on, wait. I'm gonna zip up my sweater. See how zip up my pants. I'm gonna zip up my pants like last time. I love it. I love it. Okay, here we go. In 3, 2. I guess we don't have to take it that seriously, but we'll just do the clap again.
Yeah.
Jason, welcome back. Episode 2. We made it through episode 1. Pretty excited about that. And we're trying to tell a little bit of our backstories. We just heard a little bit about your backstory, and I think you're going to ask me a few questions about my backstory.
Yeah. I mean, how did you get started in detailing, and were you always a car person?
It's a really good question, Jason. I don't think as a child I was super into cars as much as you stayed, especially at least not by 4 years old. 4 years old is a little. I don't know what I was doing at 4 years old, right?
That you don't even know what you were doing, huh?
No, but I do remember my first time that I was really drawn to a vehicle, and it was really so my uncle had some property in central Wisconsin, and as a boy, we would go up to the farm, and my uncle had this old GMC. It was a 53 GMC, and this truck was awesome. And I think it was the first truck I learned actually how to drive stick shift on.
Oh,
But
wow.
additionally to that, I think what drew me in with that was the sound of the truck, because it's a flathead 6, and it had that real throaty
Yeah.
kind of sound to it. And I remember being kind of like, that's different, was that truck. And then, when I was a young man, my dad taught me how to drive stick on that truck. So it was 3 on the tree. It was a super cool vehicle. And I kind of think that was like the first time I remember paying attention to a vehicle where I was like, this is really cool.
How old were you when you first drove it by yourself with your dad?
I don't know if I don't think I actually ever drove it by myself, but I was probably around maybe 12, 13 years old when
So
I actually got.
on the farm then.
Yeah, on the farm, we started screwing around, and it was country roads and stuff. So I got some pictures that I'll have to dig up about that vehicle, and it was, I think that was the first time, my first memory of actually being pulled in by a vehicle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a cool time. I mean, I loved going up there, and when we were kids, before I was able to drive it, we would always jump around in the back of the vehicle and go down the country roads when someone else was driving it. But that was my first memory of being like drawn inward on a vehicle, and it was fun, super fun. So GMC,
GMC, huh? Right on.
yeah, that's what. and I think that's part of the reason why I've always kind of wanted a GMC, another newer GMC. But maybe one day. I like the Denali's, Jason, but maybe another day down the road.
So after that love affair with your uncle's pickup truck, what kept on leading you into essentially cleaning cars and selling product?
So it's super cool. Like, my dad was not a car enthusiast or like a super car person, but my father painted. He was a painter, home painter, painted wallpaper and did all that stuff on the side. My dad was a school teacher, but on the weekends, that was his side hustle, was painting. So I remember my dad using the family station wagon for his side jobs on the weekend. And before the work week would start, he'd get done with his, he'd get done with his painting and stuff. And so he would have to get the vehicle kind of cleaned up for my mom. And it was basic stuff, really just vacuuming out the car, full service kind of car wash stuff, right?
Sure,
Real
sure.
simple things, pulling out the vacuum. My dad smoked cigars, so he was always sucking up the cigar ashes and cleaning the inside windows, and then just basic maintenance stuff. So I have good memories of that as a boy, kind of being in the driveway, cleaning up the cars, just really simple things. And then in high school, we had the automotive program, and so when I got into high school, some of these corresponding themes with cleaning cars, I was always started to pay a bit more attention to vehicles as my opportunity to get my driver's license got a little closer. I started in the automotive program at high school, and a really really cool thing. Our teacher at the time, Mr. Sereno was his name, and he had a relationship with a couple people from the local work program, and I was around. Of course, it was revolved around automotive, but they had someone come in from the local car dealership speak to the automotive program about hiring students from the high school to go and work part-time at the dealership as a porter. And I just thought that was really cool. I wasn't in school, I wasn't a good student, I wasn't a bad student, but my grades were average, and I was like, I want to work with my hands, I want to be around people, and the car dealership just seemed to be the right avenue for me,
Sure. Explain to our listeners what a porter is.
So a porter, I mean, at that time, I feel like probably today the term porter is probably a little different than it once was, but porter is basically you're kind of a car jockey. And at that time,
Moving cars around the lot.
yeah. I mean, so at that time at the Pontiac store, it was when I started working there, it was named Ridge Motors, but it later changed its name to O'Hare Pontiac. It was a Pontiac, Hyundai, and a Honda store. And like I've talked about this a little bit on different platforms before, but the dealership days were probably some of the coolest days of work, and a lot of the lessons I learned there were awesome. But being that close, I lived in Des Plaines. The dealership was in Des Plaines, so I think it was a 3-mile commute. And being a porter at that time, we did a little bit of everything. When a service vehicle needed to be picked up, we would pull the service vehicles up to the customer, hand them their keys. We were getting new cars ready for sale. We were getting used cars ready for sale. And I think my finest memories of the dealership was transporting cars from the satellite location. We had not collectively, there was a couple different lots, I believe, but there was one specific one where they delivered the new cars. So when the new cars got delivered, we would have to take groups of people a couple miles across town to pick up the new cars, to bring them back, to put them on the lot for the dealer. And that was freaking awesome. So I had a lot of fun. But in the beginning, Jason, I didn't have, so I started working at the car dealership as a porter when I was 15. So I had a driver's permit.
Crazy.
A driver's permit. And with a permit, I was only able to drive on the dealership lot. I couldn't drive out off the dealership lot. And then when I turned 16, I was not able, I could drive off lot, but not after dark. So it wasn't until I was 17 that I could actually be, off the lot after dark with a dealer car. And that job, I feel, really framed a lot of my future and also set the tone for where I am today. And my first boss, Bill Reese, he said this to me, and I still think about it a lot. He said, the lessons that you learn here today are lessons that you'll take with you for the rest of your life. And I feel there's some truth to that. It was super cool to be able to work with other automotive people, right? Because you work inside a dealership. It's not just porters. We were kind of crammed in the back of the dealership.
Sure.
We had our own little prep stalls for doing all the finishing work, and across from that was the wash rack. And you're working with parts guys, you're working with of course mechanics, and you're learning how to socialize, interact with one another. And it's a really cool job. At the time, I didn't think much.
15 years old, so it's like you look at a 15-year-old now. I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
Very
they're
few
playing sports and doing different things, and I was working.
working. Yeah.
And school really wasn't my thing. I mean, and like I said, I enjoyed going to school, but I have ADHD, and so I'm always kind of looking at the shiny ball, and so I never, I don't want to say I failed in school, but I didn't excel. I wasn't a straight A student, which isn't bad. And
No.
my dad was super cool about it. He was always like, as long as you show you're prompt, you show up on time, and you put forth effort. It doesn't matter if you underperform in a few things. You need to have those fundamental
Sure.
skills. So it was really really cool. The dealership was a huge part of my career.
And how long did you work at that dealership for?
So I was at gosh, I think I started right around maybe like 1997
Okay.
is when I started working at the dealership, right? The late 97 and 98. I was at the dealership for almost 7 years, so into the early 2000s.
From 15.
Yeah, from 15, it was super cool. So some fast forward just like a little bit, as things kind of changed inside the dealership organization, management changed a little bit, and I happened to be there right at that swing where, because when you think about Pontiac as a car brand, they're non-existent today, really.
Yeah.
And the Pontiac line was really, really, really strong. And at that time, Hyundai and Honda was still kind of taking off, but I happened to be there right in the time where Pontiac started kind of dying off and started getting beat by Hyundai and Honda. And with that swing in car sales and stuff, there were some, management changes, employee changes, and good enough for me, I happened to be in the right spot at the right time. I kind of climbed the ladder a little bit and assumed a bit more responsibility. I got promoted and I became the porter manager, started hiring porters. I was in charge. I had a few more responsibilities. Had to do the gas logs at the end of the night, and I also was in charge of snow removal. So more responsibility was replaced on my shoulders. And at that time, one of the other roles I fell into was ordering the supplies for the
Wow.
dealership.
And
So
how old were you when you did all this?
I was probably just out of high school, probably around maybe 18, 19 years old.
So
So
you
I was
had
porter manager,
a lot of
you know.
responsibilities at still a very young age.
Yeah, yeah, and it was super cool. I mean, I think about it now, and the owner of the dealership and the people kind of saw my enthusiasm and my passion, but I also lived really close to the dealership, so I feel like that helped, right? Had I lived 20 miles away, I still probably would have had these responsibilities, but I feel like they entrusted me a little bit more because if there were some problems in the after hours, I would be able to. It was close, and especially when it came for snow removal in the wintertime, that was like I had so much fun running the plow truck in those days at the dealer. It was super super cool. But that's a whole. Maybe we'll touch base on that in another podcast. But yeah, the dealership really lit my fuse, and the company at the time that was delivering goods. We had two local companies. One was called Crow Save, and the other one was called Pro Finish, and we were buying, our reconditioning supplies from them. The bulk car wash soap, the bulk degreaser, the tire dressing, and all the other utilities that go with it, the brushes, the buff pads, the towels. And so it started to kind of I became more introduced and kind of further immerse myself into all of the tools that go into into detailing cars. And so one of the first times I ever saw paint get wet sanded at the dealership, that I walked in, we had shift change between 3 and 4 p.m. There was a WS6 Trans Am that was going for sale, and the daytime porter, Hiram, was sanding out a scratch. And so I got there in the afternoon, punched in, went to go check in with the porters to get a workload of what's going on for the evening with the spot deliveries, and he's in the back on the ground sanding the car. And I remember for the first time seeing sanded paint. I was very confused.
Yeah.
Very
I'm
confused.
sure.
But it was shortly after that I was interested, and this older full-time union porter, Hiram, was really kind of excited and eager to, share with me what he was doing. Like, hey, we're using this sandpaper, we're using this buffer, and we're fixing the scratch. It's a sold car, this and that. And I feel like at that point, when I saw that and I saw the buffer in his hands, it really kind of, from that point, took it a lot further. Because at the time, when we started as porters, we really weren't, I personally wasn't buffing cars. The organization was still polishing cars, but new car prep was really just clean the rims, clean the tires, wash the car, pull the stickers off. And at that time, we were hand waxing every car. We used
presentable.
make it presentable. Yeah, so it wasn't until I saw Hiram with that polisher in his hand that I feel like that was the part that pulled me in even further. And I do remember this. I don't remember if it was a Bonneville or if it was a Pontiac Grand Am, but I do remember late one night, shortly after I saw the vehicle getting wet sanded for the first time, I had, opened up the cabinet, and I remember rubbing by hand a polish on the whole vehicle, and then taking a wool pad and buffing it off. Like, I didn't know what I was really doing. I kind of saw the guys doing it, but I didn't know the specifics. But I remember that, like, late one night, I'm like, I'm gonna hand polish this thing and polish the product off the car. It was a really cool time. And it was a great time to be, to get introduced to this stuff,
Sure. So what happened after that, and where did you go in your journey?
Jason, the story gets super interesting from there. So, I feel like I climbed the ladder at the dealership, and it was a good job. And I felt that there would have been a pretty respectable future for me to stay working there. But my gut was like, management's changing, Pontiac's kind of going down, and there was some ruffled feathers amongst the employees, and it felt like it was time to go. And coincidentally enough, the company that was delivering the supplies to the dealership, I had built a pretty respectable relationship with them, and they were at the time looking for another person to put out in the field as a sales guy. And I thought it was kind of a neat job. The gentleman that serviced the dealership, his name was Mike. He showed up on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, but he had a little box truck, had a bunch of detailing tools, supplies, and equipment, on the truck. And so when he would show up weekly, I'd go make the purchases, and I kind of envisioned myself doing that. I was like, this is a cool job.
Mm-hmm.
You're like kind of like a bread salesman, or you know what I mean, like the ice cream man in a way, but you're selling detailing supplies. And so after talking to the group, I ended up saying goodbye to the dealership and going to work for this local distributor. It was a local company here in Elk Grove called Pro Finish, and they were, at the time, they were not manufacturing any liquids, but they were buying from other manufacturers and putting it on on their trucks and taking it out into the field and selling it. So it's a fun job,
Sure.
I feel like in the beginning, working for them, it was a really slow transition. And I remember the owner of the dealer, Kevin, coming up to me and talking to me when he found out I was leaving. He was kind of bummed. And he's like, Matt, you've been a really good employee, and I would love for you to stay, but I also respect your interest to go out and better yourself. So, if you want more hours, less hours, money, he's like, let's talk about it. But I trusted the gut, and I followed my heart, and it led me down this path, which is I'm still on today. But it was a great lesson, and transitioning from the car dealership to the distribution salesman's hat, I feel is like really where the next chapter began for myself. It was a lot of fun.
Well, funny story, you mentioned Pontiac dealership. I actually worked for 3 days at a GMC Pontiac dealership when I was younger too.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
No kidding. Was it? So it was. You said Pontiac GMC dealership.
Yeah.
So you said it was 3 days, Kilmer. Did you get fired?
No. Let's just say the manager thought that like cerebral palsy was like contagious.
Okay.
Yeah. yeah, it's a long story, but
That's a
yeah,
whole nother podcast.
yeah, he was scared that I was going to sue him or sue the dealership, or people are ignorant. So
Yeah.
whatever, it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. See, another little nugget. I didn't know this. I know a lot, but
Yeah,
we're still
yeah.
learning things as we go down this avenue
So
here.
you mentioned Pro Finish.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
what happens after the dealership?
So I go to work for this company, Pro Finish, and it was really a great job. The guys that a small family-owned business, and the gentleman that started the organization, he actually came from the body shop industry.
Oh wow, okay.
So and he was a car person, car enthusiast. Him and his brother built cars. They raced cars. They were just really automotive people. So they were really good mentors and coaches and guys to be around for a long time, because they were just really passionate about what they did, and they still are. I mean, they're still out in the field today doing what they do best, the route truck sales. But the route truck, in the beginning, working for Pro Finish, it was really, I was kind of a grunt, a warehouse guy.
Sure.
I'd go in and before I actually started, I didn't jump right into sales. I had to kind of learn some of the basics, right? The trucks would show up and I was the warehouse guy. So put away product, put away inventory, sweep, take out the garbage, break down the cardboard boxes, basic grunt warehouse work. And then, when the guys would get back, I'd help them load the trucks, and we'd keep the trucks clean. And I think the one thing I hated doing the most, which I appreciate now, was actually doing buffer repairs, because at that time they were selling Milwaukee polishers, and they were also selling the DeWalt tools, the 849s and all that stuff. And when those broke, if there was like if a speed control went bad or a trigger failed, they'd bring them back to the shop. We'd have the parts in stock, and we'd break them down, and we were basically doing tool repair.
Sure.
And so it was far easier. It was a lot easier for me to fix a Milwaukee buffer than to fix those DeWalts.
Okay.
And that was the thing I hated doing the most. But now, learning how to do that and repairing my own tools, I'm super happy that I had an opportunity to learn that skill. Yeah. So I think it was roughly maybe 6 months in the warehouse before I started going out in the field with the gentleman, Kevin, that owned the organization. And so I go out in the field. Kevin was a sales guy, and I was essentially his right-hand man. Like, if there were drums that we had to deliver, I'd help him get the drums off and carry the goods into the place. And that's the part I think I really enjoyed about it, right? At that time, we're talking the early 2000s. This is really before social media and all that stuff. And we had tangible goods, and so it was neat to be able to have that ability to show up at a car wash or a detail shop or municipalities, all the organizations, dealerships, and help these guys solve problems.
Well,
right?
Because let's face it, the internet had not really taken off. It was
Yep.
barely dial-up.
Yep.
Amazon was not around, or if it was, it just had started.
Sure.
There wasn't purchases from Amazon. It wasn't this 2-day doorstep stuff.
Sure.
There were still brick and mortars and trucks and
Right.
sort
Right.
of business model.
Right. And you think about it, it really wasn't that long ago.
No.
It's 20 years ago. So it was really cool to have that opportunity to be out in the field. And I remember, I think it was about a full year before. It was about 6 months doing, generic warehouse training and the grunt work, I like to call it, shop dog kind of person,
Sure.
where I'm doing all that stuff. But then the other 6 months was in the field daily with the gentleman that owned the company. And so I think that's where the salesmanship and some of the other, I feel like I learned a lot of lessons on how to use my words and talk to people at the dealership. And then being in sales helped kind of refine that.
Sure.
And then being around other people and watching those interactions, that was really, really, really cool. But after about a year of working at this organization, the gentleman cut me loose, put me in my own truck, and I basically went to town. And, I believe in the beginning, I have the numbers to go back and look at it, but the route truck was generating at the time with a Monday, Tuesday route, maybe 30 stops that we'd make, I was selling $15,000 to $18,000 a month in supplies, which was a little bit to get going, but to kind of get to the next level, I had to cold call, and I had
You were how
no.
old?
I was 21, 22 years old.
I mean, think
Yeah.
about that to today's standard of where 21-year-olds are at.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I mean, I kind of can't believe it either. I mean, it really wasn't that long ago, but it was, yeah, it was a small company. So there was really no business development center. There was really no, formula for success. I mean, we kind of knew what worked and what didn't work, but I had to really just go out in the field and see what I can do and see what I can generate and see what I can bring to the table. So
Sure.
it was a challenge. And on my days that I didn't have customers, Jason, I literally like drove around aimlessly. I mean,
Really?
I had a territory in the southern
Yeah.
suburbs of Chicago, and I had some leads, I had some ideas, and I had some things, but I didn't really have a roadmap for that. And so I was like, I mean, a lot of what happened was driving past places. Like,
Okay.
I wonder who they buy product from.
Really?
You know what I mean? And pull in and blind cold call.
Just
And I did a lot of face-to-face cold calling in in my early 20s. Lots.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I've been around the city with you, and you're like, I know that guy, and you know everybody in the
Yeah. Yeah.
tri-state area.
Yeah. I mean, it's, time goes by fast and you start, I think that's what's cool with automotive is that people tend to stay inside a network. So if it's a detail shop or a dealership or it's a car wash and somebody that's working for them, leaves one place and goes to another place, they're usually staying inside that industry or under that umbrella.
Sure.
And so it kind of like anything, as you start gaining market share and people start knowing more about specific products, what would happen is some guy liked a certain product that we sold and they go to another place that doesn't use that product. They pick up the phone, hey, can you bring this? I want to buy this stuff from you. So as you start building it, I felt like it got a little easier to make those cold calls and make the sales. But in the beginning, I had no roadmap. And it was a great lesson that I appreciate now because I learned how to sell and I learned how to talk to people.
Your work ethic was your roadmap.
Yeah, yeah. And it was just like, I got to keep growing this book of business. I got to keep increasing my revenues. And it was really cool that at the time, it wasn't a big pushy corporate sales thing where, you had a deadline and a quota because, you worked a 100% commission job. I didn't get paid a salary. I mean, that first year I did get paid a salary or basically an hourly rate. But when I switched over to doing sales full time, I didn't have a guarantee. It was whatever I sold at the end of the month is what I made a profit, and at that time, I didn't get a paycheck weekly. I got a paycheck once a month. We would accumulate what we sold total for the month, and at the end of that month, that was my paycheck. So that was kind of a cool thing too, is learning how to manage money a little bit, right? Because you got to go 4 or 5 weeks without getting a paycheck, and then you get paid. And in the beginning, the paychecks weren't very big because I wasn't really,
Selling.
but I was living at home with my parents and I was detailing cars on the side on the weekends, So you kind of take the money that you make during the day at your day job and then take the money you make from the weekends doing your side work and collectively, slowly building blocks, and time goes on. But so super cool. I look back at that job and it's definitely a young man's job because the 55-gallon drums, I think about how many drums we sold. We sold a lot. We were at the time the exclusive distributors for AIM Chemicals in Atlanta, Georgia, and we were getting sometimes 2 to 3 trucks a week. And
Fully loaded?
Yeah. 22 spots or 22 pallets from front to back.
Wow.
And in the early days, we didn't have a loading dock, so the truck would pull up, and we would offload them. We'd pallet jack them to the back. The forklift would take them off from the street, bring them in, and then we'd have to break all that stuff down and put it away. So it was a lot of labor. you
Yeah.
know, and I think about that now, and that's why I said it's a young man's job. I was in my
Yeah.
20s, and gosh, I know I've said this to you before that I wish I actually had more analytics on 55-gallon drums sold, 'cause, especially the ones that I moved. You know, if somebody, I'd go out in the field for the day, and you know, sometimes I'd have 7, 8, 10, 12 drums on the truck, sometimes more, but every one of those had to get loaded on the truck, you know, and then you got to take it out in the field, and you got to pull it off the truck and bring it into the location. So I've moved a lot of liquids, and that's
Yeah.
why I say,
How did your truck stop when you had 7, 8, 55-gallon drums? I mean, that's moving liquid, so that
well,
had to be
there's an,
sketchy.
yeah, yeah, you had to, I mean, there's a whole nother skill learning how to, you know, drive with heavy liquids.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You got to be very ginger on your turns. You need to make sure you're braking way in advance, and it could be, you know, very dangerous. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
very dangerous.
And a lot of those
So,
chemicals are explosive and
well,
corrosive.
sure, yeah, we carried around a lot of corrosive liquids and a lot of flammables, and it definitely, you're right, it's dangerous. I think about it now sometimes about all the 55-gallon drums that we would take out into the field of the hexane tire dressing. I was basically driving like a ticking bomb, and had I,
Yeah, a hydrogen bomb essentially.
yeah, hydrogen bomb. Yeah, it was, but it was that job really kind of lit my, and again, it was one of those things that kind of just pulled me further and deeper into the industry, and it was some great people that I met along the way, and over time, and growth, it's things. I was a young man, and I was hungry, and I was motivated to have more and to want more, and I kind of inspired for more. And the gentleman that owned the organization, he was, I mean, he was a super awesome dude, but he also kind of wasn't, in my eyes, very progressive. Just kind of wanted to stay in his own little box,
Sure.
and I wanted to grow beyond that box. And so around that time when I started feeling about like I had kind of hit my ceiling or my cap, things started to change a little bit, and he things just, let's say things got weird, right? You know, it's like I feel like in a lot of ways I maybe outgrew the organization just a little bit, and then he had a falling out with the manufacturer AIM, and it led to some unpleasant dealings, and I walked away from all of that, and shortly after I walked away from Pro Finish, the manufacturer actually had a falling out with them, and it didn't take long. I think I left Pro Finish in the fall of 2011. It was when I left. I mean, so it was the early 2000s. It's funny. It's like that, like lucky sevens. I was at the dealership for almost 7 years,
Wow.
and then I was with Pro Finish for almost 7 years. And then after I left Pro Finish, I had actually gotten one of my good customers at the time. Was a very active, very heavily involved with wholesale detailing for the dealerships.
Okay.
He got tied up with Sears Automotive, and Sears at the
Okay.
time,
Yeah.
locally here in our backyard in Chicago, Sears was trying to start an automotive reconditioning program. They wanted
Now,
to start
wasn't
doing.
Sears and Roebuck wasn't headquarters here in Chicago?
Yep,
Okay.
yep,
Okay.
yeah. So their corporate offices at this time was actually in Hoffman Estates, and they had at their campus they had a little automotive department there. But basically, the long and short of it is this: Sears had a lot of real estate, these big auto shops where they were, you know, they were built really big, you know, through the 70s, 80s, and 90s to accommodate lots of volume, bigger cars, and then over time, competition and stuff, they started doing less volume, but they still had all this real estate that was useful. So they wanted to basically try to bring in a licensed business or a licensed part like under the Sears name
Okay.
and utilize this space that they were underutilizing, right? So
Okay.
it was a really kind of neat thing for me to different role.
Yeah.
I was more of a district manager for them, but they wanted to kick off over 2 years. I think they wanted to start doing. I think it was 5 locations that they wanted to have this automotive thing take way. So my role was to hire and train detailers, and so coincidentally, right? So I leave Pro Finish and I start this Sears Auto Detailing thing, and in the midst of doing all this with Sears, I had gotten contacted from the manufacturer in Atlanta, and after they had the falling out with Pro Finish, they had approached me and they were saying that they wanted. I was the only guy in Chicago that they trusted at the time, and before they pursued another distributor, they, out of respect, with my contacts and everything, they wanted to give me first right of refusal to distribute the liquids. So I had talked to my cousin and the gentleman that brought me on with Sears, and I was like, hey, I think there's an opportunity here for me to kind of sell some of these liquids to my contacts and customers that I made over the years. But additionally, we could sell some of these detailing supplies back to the Sears group because I already know how this stuff works. I know how to save money, and I can streamline the process using these products. So it was kind of like a double whammy, or I guess you could say double dipping in a way. But I wasn't taking advantage of anybody. I just wanted to see the whole thing succeed. Because if it succeeded, they would have taken this nationally, and there was a specifically one year. It was at the end of 2011. I left Pro Finish, left that job, and went to go work for Sears. And it was not long after, it was in the fall of 2011 when I did the transition. And I sadly, around the same time, I lost my dad. My dad was battling cancer, and it was a really, really, really crazy, challenging time in my life. And I also, at that point, started my very first business. So it was. I look back at that now, and I'm sometimes wonder how I pursued and came through all that stuff. But it was crazy because it all kind of came at once.
Yeah, it always does, doesn't it?
It does. It was scary. I mean, I changed jobs, lost my dad, and went into this other project with Sears. And then shortly after that, at the start of 2012, we started Pro CS. And I flew down to Atlanta, bought a route truck, bought one of their old trucks, drove it back to Chicago. And a friend of mine that owns a logistics trucking company was kind enough to lease me some space, and for pretty cheap. I think we paid $1,500 or $1,800 a month for 3,500 square feet. He let me use his forklift, and I mean, we had to.
Who I think it is?
Yeah, Nick. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's weird how it all kind of came together, but it was with all the stuff that I was going through at that point in my life. It was really hard on me, right? Having just lost my dad. And it was kind of like an awakening in a way, where I was like doing what I was doing, and shortly after I lost my dad, I started thinking about my job on the route truck. Right, the only way I could really make money then was to physically load goods onto the truck, drive out in the field, and physically carry the tangible goods to the individuals. And I started thinking like, okay, if I have to do this forever and I stick with this for my career for the rest of my life, what happens if I get sick like my dad? And I'm not going to be able to, be laid up, and I'm not going to be able to make these deliveries. And there's no infrastructure there to backfill that. So I kind of, at that point, shifted, and I had a realization that the business model was, had its capacity and its limitations.
Yeah.
And I was like, my old employer was, trying to do the best he could to, hold on to the accounts that used to be mine. And it was like war, and, fighting all the stuff that was going on in my head after losing my dad. It was a really ugly time. And thank God my wife, if she wasn't my wife at the time we were dating, she was super supportive. And I had a good support team with, of course, her and my family and friends and stuff. So we ran Pro CS. I had two partners. They were kind of silent partners. You know, they weren't active out in the field selling, but they were helping me manage the business and pay the bills and that type of stuff.
Sure.
But I was the lifeblood of it, right? I had to get in the truck every day and go and sell the products. But shortly after that, we started, right around the time we started the Pro CS distribution, we connected with a local company here called S&S. And S&S Automotive started sub-distributing two liquids that we had exclusivity for, which helped us kind of, gain some more contacts, but also bring in some more revenues. And then some other things, like at the time, I wasn't able to source clay bars and some other little
because Auto Magic had the patent on it at that time.
No, it was actually, it had nothing to do with the Automagic and the patent.
Okay.
The gentleman that owned Pro Finish had some good relationship with the vendors and kind of was like, don't sell to this guy, you can't sell him this stuff. And so
Okay.
I wasn't able to source things how I wanted to.
I got you.
So we started actually, it was crazy when I think about it now, right? We started actually buying from our competition, right? But we had like kind of a friendly competition. They were a super huge company. I was just a super little dude. And I didn't affect their sales enough to really move the needle for them, better or for worse. So we kind of had a working relationship where some of the things I couldn't source, I was buying from them. And they actually helped me out. And in the time of that relationship, I think it was close to 20 months that we were in business and working with S&S. They approached us, that we had dinner one night with the owner, and he really kind of saw the fire and the passion in my eyes, and he said something, I don't remember specifically, but like, you're too smart to be in that route truck, moving all these liquids around. You should come work for us. And their business model was they had more part numbers, they had more stuff to sell, but it was next day delivery. So no more truck. Just go around in the car and you can produce an order from your Palm Pilot, your iPad, and then they have next day delivery. Sure. And so after all I had been through for all those years being out in the field, I was kind of like, that is cool. I like to be able to, idea of just be able to go out in the field, talk to people and sell. I had enough contacts. I had enough of a reputation at that time that, it worked. So we ended up selling professional cleaning solutions to S&S Automotive. And I think in the beginning, I kind of fought it tooth and nail because the guys that I worked for, and there was a lot of bad rap. S&S kind of got a bad rap at that time out in the field. And after I sold to them, it really wasn't the case. There was a lot of good employees there, and I feel like it was part of my schooling. All of these places that I worked for that I learned, I met new people and I learned new lessons. Yeah. And I it helped me build to where I am today. Sure. And it was a tough thing. I fought it, Jason, in the beginning. I didn't want to sell, but I knew it was the right thing to do.
Well, you said like lessons, and Abraham Lincoln has a quote. He says, I learn from everybody, even if it's not what not to do. Sure.
It's totally true. And so it was a timing thing, but this is the most important thing, and I don't want to get crazy off topic before we run out of time, but I feel like the cool thing for me thinking about it is that going back to the dealership days in the 90s and then fast forward to being in the route truck in the early 2000s, it was a really pivotal time to watch how the internet influenced the change of everything, because
absolutely.
It was crazy, right? If you think of like 2002, 2003, I'm driving around in this route truck selling these products, and I brought value because I had tangible goods, but I also had a bit of experience. I had gone through some training with the manufacturers. I spent a lot of time in the lab. I spent a lot of time getting to understand how things work, and I was able to be a problem solver, as I mentioned. Sure. And so solving problems with all the dealers and stuff, it was a really important thing. But now you fast forward to 2012, 13, 14, 15, we start getting into this, now all these YouTube videos come out. Now you have all these other products. You have all these other influencers. And some of my customers that I was dealing with were a little bit older, that didn't pay attention to social media. I had a younger generation of people coming up behind that had already been watching all these videos, watching all the Larry Costello videos and Ammo, and watching all the Adams waxes and polish videos. And then I kind of feel like what I was doing quickly became devalued, right? I had this product that nobody really knew about, and now they're seeing all this brand identity and recognition on YouTube and the internet, and now people are gravitating towards something else. And here I show up, and they're kind of like, your stuff's no good.
I mean, that was the pivotal point of the internet, right? And where we're at now. But I mean, there's twofold of that too, and we'll go down that rabbit hole in next episodes following, about how the internet, we need to be careful on what we listen to and who we listen to, and there's a lot of bad information.
Yeah, man, I wish I had more analytics, Jason. Yeah. I think about it and how much fun I had and how much I learned. But that became frustrating to me because, and I've been speaking about it more lately about how it's made me feel. But right, like I ended up, after 7 years working for SNS, I didn't like the direction of where the company was going. And I kind of saw some ugly sides of the leadership that was there, and it just didn't jive with who I was, and I didn't want their integrity to represent who I was, and so that was morally that was a really hard thing for me, because it was like, hey, I love what I do, but I just don't know if I like doing it for you. And that's been, you look back at Pro Finish and the dealership and all the stuff that came before it was a similar theme, right? Like, I loved what I did, but I didn't really like doing it for you anymore. And so I say this more lately, that like it was around my wife and I got married in 2017, and it was shortly after we got married that I think it was that year of 2017 into 18 where I really had just kind of awakening, where I was like, this whole thing being in sales has run its course. The best years of my sales have been behind me. I've made some great connections, but I don't think this is for me anymore.
Sure.
I'm done, right? And so I
that pivoting point.
Yeah.
Right? That was your main pivoting point, to pivot.
Yes. Yeah. And we say this a lot, like I trust your gut, And I think about this, like every job that I had that came before where I am today, I loved every one of them, every single job. When I was working for the dealership, my first real job, I didn't want to leave, but I knew I had to go.
Sure.
And when I worked for Pro Finish, I didn't want to leave, but I knew I had to go. And the same thing with Sears. I didn't want to leave. Sears had some major potential, but I knew I had to take this other opportunity to kind of do the business transaction and start my own business. That was my first real thing. So, and then it came to sell the business. I didn't want to sell the business, but I knew I had to. And then when I was with SNS, I didn't want to leave there either, but I knew I had to go. And it was just, and so I took I kind of had a little bit of a revelation, like I'm leaving. No matter what, I'm out. And I connected with an old friend, and it was outside of automotive completely. It was in a security business and an IT world. And the guy that owned the industry, the company, he was looking to bring somebody that was green to that industry but had a sales background.
Okay.
So I ended up leaving SNS on my own merits, on good terms, so I felt on good terms.
And what year was this again?
I left SNS. It was August 1st or August 2nd of 2018 was my last day.
We're just talking a couple short years.
Yeah. So it was so I leave SNS, and I took a 3-month window before I started my next job, working for this small family-owned company. I think they had 7 employees, and it was there where in my training, I went to go work for them, and I sat with their social media marketing manager
Okay.
every Monday for a Facebook call with a gentleman in the Midwest that was a marketing manager. And it was in this time where I was doing a lot of more computer stuff, and I was watching a lot more social media. I was engaged more with Facebook and Instagram, and I started seeing more people representing themselves and building their own brand and doing their own thing. And I think it was there where the light bulb went off that I was just like, wait a second, this is kind of what I should be doing. I should be repping me and taking all this knowledge that I've, learned over the years and start implementing to my detailing business. And so I started at this new place. I was there. I started in October of 18, and I didn't even make it to the end of the year. I was there for 3 months, and I felt it. I felt it in my gut that this was a bad move. I was like, Matt, you shouldn't have done this. And I was in my head. I was already thinking, how do I get out of here? Like, what's next, right?
Yeah.
And while I was thinking that, the guy that owned the company, he laid me off, like a permanent layoff. Basically fired me, and it didn't work out. But he also gave me like a small severance to kind of help float me a little bit. He was a gentleman about it, and it was pretty cool because it was in that time. It's in that time from the very end, from December of 2018 to the start of 2019. I'd recently bought a new snowmobile, and I kind of like used that winter, December, January, February, to take that time to just for myself to clear my head and think about what was going to be next. What was my next move?
Yeah.
And so that winter time, I had a lot of opportunity to reflect on kind of all these outfits that I've been in for this, these last couple of years. And I kind of was just burnt out with being overpromised. Everyone that I always worked for overpromised me this. Oh, you're going to do this. You're going to do that. Yeah, this is going to happen. And I've always held up on my end.
Yep.
I've always grown my sales. I've always been a hustler, and I have all the paperwork to back all that stuff up. I know what I sold. So I was just like, I'm done chasing the bigness. I don't want to go after trying to set the world on fire anymore. And my passion for detailing is kind of what pulled me back in. I kind of liked the idea of doing less volume, bigger tickets. And, I already knew, I've been running the buffer, for close to 30 years, and I've been around the industry for a long time. So I already had all these parts to do a small scale detailing business. My garage was kind of not fully set up the way it is today, but I was already doing side jobs before, so it just needed some tweaking. And, fast forward, I decided to start Matthew Specialized Detailing. I was like, I don't want, what I get is what I get. I'm going to start trying to focus on corrections and coatings and try to just build a bigger ticket base and go from there. So that's really kind of what, how I got started through the 90s to where I am today, Jason. I think I kind of covered a lot.
Crazy. We come from, like I said, opposite ends of the spectrum, but at essentially the same time. I'm 2 years older than you, but right around the same time.
Yeah, it's crazy, Jay. I know we're getting close to our mark here to wrap up, but we're going to talk a little bit in the next episode about how you and I met. But it's just, I mentioned before, I wish I had more analytics on all this stuff. And unfortunately, the analytics of, the stuff of the liquids that I sold and all the stuff I did at the dealership. But, I didn't start my Instagram page until 2019.
Yeah.
So here comes someone like myself that's kind of green in the world of social media in some aspects, but is certainly not green when it comes to auto detailing, especially with some of the, I say this a lot, that my years of experience with being involved with distribution and manufacturing and stuff like that, it's given me the opportunity to see the industry through a different lens.
Well, I think the key with you is you're a people person.
Sure.
People.
Yeah.
That's the key right there. If you know people and how they're going to zig when you zag and vice versa, You
Yep.
already win the game.
Yeah, there's an emotional intelligence to that stuff, and making connections with people, and I guess maybe I was born with it, and it's the artistry, and my other passion is music, as we sit here in the studio with the guitars behind me. But learning how to speak and talk to people, it's definitely not easy, but the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Practice.
So it's been pretty cool. But the the part I wanted to say is, and I think anybody that owns a business or anybody that's involved with any type of business on any level is a lack of accountability. There's this lack of accountability that we're all missing in the world these days, and we're all guilty of it to some levels. But specifically, when you're the soap salesman or you're the product salesman, and someone falls short of an expectation, it's a lot easier to place the blame on someone else. And so I feel like a really big part of the reason why I actually immersed myself into the detailing industry again, this time with my own name on it, is because of the lack of accountability and the lack of respect. There's a lot of people, I like, and I'm not picking on everybody. I'm not trying to bash anyone, but I'm just, I like to use the term fast food detailers, right? Because there's just too much stuff. Guys, the whole industry is built around speed. And that's not necessarily bad, but that leads down to the path of destructive detailing, I like to call it. So you just get burnt out. You get burnt out being the punching bag. You're getting beat up from your customers on the bottom, and then you're getting beat up from your leaders at the top. And after so much time of that, it's kind of run its course. You're like, I'm done. And so
a person can only take so much.
Yeah, so it's super cool. It was such a cool story, and I know with this podcast, as this podcast matures, we'll probably revisit some of these stories that
Absolutely.
that I'm talking about, or there'll be a specific time about working with this customer, or what happened at this dealership, or what happened with this product. I mean, there's a lot to go down, going back, into the 90s. So it was really a lot of fun, and I'm grateful for those experiences now, right? Because some people go to college, for a long, long time, and people study one thing for, multiple years. And I like to think that my years at the dealership plus my 17 years in the field as a sales guy, like, that's my schooling. That's where you
can't buy that.
You see the good, the good, the bad, the ugly. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, and working for yourself, I think, is the ultimate reward. No matter what dollar, big or small, you end up bringing to the table. And it's been really cool to see the type of traction that I've been able to gain in my small business in the last number of years. So, we're kind of moving on to different things and kind of aligning and bringing people together, and the universe, brought the two of us together, and we're trying to kind of start this whole other thing. So it'll be exciting to see what happens in the future,
Well, I'm definitely excited, and it's been an honor and a privilege to hang out with you. And this is my second home. I've been here to Chicago more than I have any other place in the last few years. So,
it's a good thing. We got work to do. So kind of as we wrap up this second episode, we wanted to talk a little bit about your backstory and a little bit about my backstory, because I feel that it's very important for us to revisit this in the future, and for the future listeners to kind of come back and hear this stuff, because there's, it's going to come up a lot as these episodes start to pass us by. So I guess that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. Perfect. And we'll wrap up this episode before we start going over the hour mark. And our next episode is going to tell the story a little bit about how you and I connected and what led us to where we are today. So I guess we'll sign off, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of Driven by Details.
Episode 3.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks.
Take care. Boom. Cut. 59 minutes, Jay.
Man.
Stop.